everyone, I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Eric.
And today Eric made me watch a film called Adaptation. This is a Nicolas Cage movie that came out in 2002 and is a film, Eric, that I remember coming out. I was working in a movie theater when this came out.
Oh, interesting.
And I always meant to see it, but I never got around to it. I never really knew what it was about. It was just one of those kind of acclaimed movies right then that I was hearing buzz about. I don't even know how well it performed.
I don't know.
I don't know if it did very well or not, but I remember people at the theater talking about it, and I just didn't get around. Yeah, December of 2002 we found out. I'd been working at the theater for a while then. That's the same year and almost the same month that Star Trek Nemesis comes out.
Oh, really?
It was just a month after that, yeah. And like I said, I heard a lot of good things about it, and I think maybe I knew that it had kind of a writer theme and that it was about writing, and I just never got around to seeing it. So finally, getting an education here from Eric, Eric pulled this out and decided it was a movie that I probably should see. And whoo boy, is this a wild film! Yeah. This show is rough because I need time, maybe days, to fully digest this movie, and Eric is making me talk about it, as we are now traditionally doing on this show. Three episodes in, this is how we do this show. Seconds after I saw the film, we watched it, just hit record, and here we go. So Eric, why'd you choose this film?
It was a movie that I had assumed you would have seen.
Yeah.
And it wasn't initially like one of the films I was like, oh, I'm going to make you watch this. It came up at some point, and you were like, oh, I've never seen that. And I was like, oh, you need to see Adaptation.
I don't know how I missed that. I don't know how I never got around to watching it.
I feel like it's a film that's kind of flown under the radar.
And how more people haven't tried to put it under my nose, because every so often somebody will be like, Cap, have you seen Stranger Than Fiction? Mm-hmm. This is a movie you need to see, and this is one of those.
Yeah, you need to see this, and probably especially now, you need to see this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you want me to try and plot synopsize?
Sure, absolutely.
I think I can do it pretty easily.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so Adaptation is a film that is kind of two stories. One of them is, there's a book called The Orchid Thief by Susan Orlean. This is a real nonfiction book.
Okay, I didn't realize that. Because I knew some of it was autobiographical and some of it wasn't, and so I was kind of enjoying, I didn't want to look things up on my phone while I was watching it. I was kind of enjoying not knowing what about it was biopic-y. I'm
gonna break your brain in a second.
Oh boy, excellent.
Okay, so Susan Orlean writes a book called The Orchid Thief. Part of this movie is an adaptation of that novel, and this is billed. If you look in the credits, it says adaptation of.
It doesn't even say loosely based on.
No, and it also wins the British Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay.
Which is so funny.
The other part of this film is...
That's just an opportunity you don't waste, right?
The other part of this film, or the other story of this film, is Nicolas Cage plays brothers Charlie and Donald Kaufman. Charlie is an acclaimed screenwriter. He's the actual writer of the film. It is the story of the writing of the movie that you are watching.
It doesn't get much more meta than that, right?
Yeah, and there's scenes sometimes where he is narrating, into his taking notes for scenes you have already seen or will later see, or there's one where he is narrating what you're seeing at the moment.
But there's no way everything we saw happens in real life.
Right.
Right? There's no way.
Well,
that big third act stuff.
Well, and that's
the attempted
clearly
murder and everything.
That's
happens
clearly
in real life.
Some metatextual, because he goes to the Brian Cox. And he's like, you have to punch up the ending. You gotta make it good. Okay. Now here's where I'm gonna break your brain. You're gonna hate me.
Okay.
Donald doesn't exist. He's entirely fictitious. His brother does not.
Life?
In real life, his brother does not exist.
That does not surprise me.
Okay. Okay. Good. Oh, good. I was worried that was gonna
No, and part of the reason that I say, let me say this first, part of the reason that I say that I enjoyed not knowing what was real and what wasn't is because that allows me, as I'm watching it and before I start getting into it and learning everything about real life versus fiction, to just take it as a fiction, just as a piece, which I always like to do with a biopic. So at the end of the day, I don't really care what's real and what's not.
Cool.
It's for the sake of the narrative. It's interesting. You know, it's cool to find out. But for instance,
screenplay by, it says Charlie and Donald Kaufman.
Okay, that's really interesting and hilarious, and that they even get away with putting that on the box.
Yeah.
And
it's in the credits of the film as well. It'll say screenplay by.
But that's why, you know, and I've used this example before when I look at something like Saving Mr. Banks, the fact that like she would have hated that movie and that she the woman that movie's about, that like she hated Mary Poppins the film and all of that doesn't hurt that, doesn't kill that movie for me at all.
It's a good movie.
I'm looking at it just as a movie, and I walked in intentionally without doing any research. It becomes more sticky when you know a lot, you know. Like if they ever make a Stan Lee biopic, it's going to be hard for me not to have any bias walking into that film,
right?
You know, and that kind of thing. But anyway, yeah, that doesn't hurt my feelings at all.
Good.
Something that I think is interesting is I questioned whether or not he was real from frame one.
Oh.
Watching the film. And it took a couple scenes before I was sure that he wasn't just a figment of the other guy's imagination. Because this is the kind of movie that's got you thinking in that direction, because it makes you suspicious of it real early. When you start jumping back and forth between different time periods, and then you realize that that one section is informing the other section, but you don't, like, and I'm sure a lot of people watching this for the first time would have assumed this. I assumed that the other stuff was entirely fictitious for a while, and thought that it was like the book that he was writing or something, until I remember, oh yeah, he's writing a screenplay, so it can't be that. And then we then know that he's looking at this book that he's adapting, and I'm like, okay, it can't be that. What is it? And then I got really confused by the timestamps, which are ultimately really informative, where it says 3 years ago. I'm like, but how can it be 3 years ago if I'm looking at what's basically another reality? But I'm not looking at another reality. But then I start thinking, okay, but how much of what I'm looking at actually really happened? Because I know by about the middle of the film to maybe a little bit past that what I'm looking at is the filmed version of a screenplay he wrote about the things that I'm looking at from 3 years ago. So it can't really be 3 years ago because it can't be exactly the way it happened. But then, for the sake of the narrative, it kind of is. So anyway.
So you have these two plot lines.
That was kind of my experience with it. Anyway, sorry.
So you have these two plot lines, and
I just
they
jumped ahead.
Converge at the end,
right,
and become kind of a commentary on film and writing, more writing than film, really, but kind of a commentary on writing and
adaptation. Adapting something into a movie. It's as much about screenwriting, as it is anything. Yeah.
Is kind of the thing about drama and how you need drama in your work, and because Charlie Kaufman wants to write this adaptation of this book where nothing really happens. There doesn't seem to be drama in the book, and he starts writing a screenplay about the book, trying to not have drama, trying not to have love or revenge or anything.
Because that's the world he knows.
Because that's the world he knows, and he goes to a writing professor who is not a real person, but I believe is based on a real person, inspired by a real person.
Who's the guy that his brother, because they're both screenwriters.
Yep.
And he's the guy.
His brother's writing the greatest movie of all time.
I want that movie. The fact that nobody has tried to make that movie after this is a crying shame. I want to do it so bad. That would be the weirdest fan film. Because that's what it would be. Like, you and I kept going, we should make this movie. Well, we can't get the rights to that.
Yeah,
so
it
would be a fan film called The
An
Three.
Adaptation film.
Yeah, and it would be an adaptation of The Three based on the film Adaptation. Oh, I want to do it so bad.
his brother is writing Charlie Kaufman's brother Donald is writing a
psychological thriller.
Yeah,
that's
what seems kind of to mostly paint by numbers, the kind of movie that kind of like Seven, I think.
Or the number 23.
Yeah, the number 23 is it's something like that.
It's a movie that seems really interesting but completely falls apart by the end. And in this, we understand why it falls apart before we really know what the story is.
Because all three of them are the same person.
Yeah, which is...
It's about a serial killer who abducts a girl and a cop hunting the serial killer, but all three of them are the same person. And at some point, there's a car/horse chase where the cop is in a car chasing the killer and the girl on a horse. And they're all the same person
somehow. And I already thought that was hilarious when he was like... When Charles, and I love how you had to really spell this out, where Donald was not getting it, where Charles is like, okay, so he's trapped in a basement
while he's investigating
where he is in the basement, and Donald's like, I don't see your point.
But so he's been taking these screenwriting classes with this famous writer. So Charlie is having a really hard time writing the script. He goes to this famous screenwriter, which is
brilliantly by Brian Cox.
I told you he was great. He's in like four minutes.
He's not very much, but he's standout. But he's standout in everything. I love Brian Cox. And quickly becoming one of my favorite actors the more things I see.
And he gives Charlie Kaufman advice on how to fix his screenplay, which is have a really strong ending. He kind of suggests that you can save anything, or people will walk out liking your film if your ending is
holes and
it's got to not be strong.
A Deus Ex Machina. I loved that.
Yeah, and then that's what the movie is. Like the narratives converge at this point and become a super intriguing thriller film.
Mm-hmm. And it switches gears fast.
Where the woman who was writing the book is actually in love with the guy she was writing the book about, and the flower, I assume that flower cannot be made into drugs, but the flower that he's been stealing can be made into drugs, and they're starting a drug ring, and there's a shootout, and Charlie Kaufman's brother dies. It's a weird movie.
Yeah. I will do this up front. Just up front.
Do you think Poison Ivy killed somebody with Charlie Kaufman?
Hit him with a
potted Kaufman?
Plant. Yeah, with a potted Kaufman. You asked me before, or you said the big question before we started watching this would I find this ultra pretentious or not?
Yeah, I figured you would either think it's because I kind of think this is a brilliant film, and I figured you would either go there or you would think it's super pretentious.
I'm having, except for the fact that the ending kind of works, I'm having the same thing I did with Birdman, where it's both.
Okay.
Or where I could see why a person would say it's both, and I want to digest it, and I feel like I need another watch, because this is one of those movies where you don't entirely know where you stand with it till you get to the end, because I wasn't 100% sure that it was going to go full tilt with what the premise seemed to be midway through, which is you are watching the film he's writing, and I thought that's what it was ultimately going to turn into, but I didn't know if it would go that far, and it has to go that far, or I don't think it ultimately really works. I'm impressed with how, even if it does seem a little it's also one of those movies that feels like it's trying to get away with that by talking about how pretentious of an idea it is. And it's also a movie about how up in the air it sometimes is, whether something really commercial can be art, and what exactly being art means, and what effective storytelling is. And you're right. I mean, this is a really good time to watch this for me, both with the personal emotional stuff that resonated with me with Nick Cage's with his main character, which we should talk about some, but also in that discussion and commentary which has been coming up a whole lot as of late with us and with superhero movies, especially, where is the movie good because it's acting like it's all super complex and stuff, or does it just have to be a great thrill ride, or like if it puts its themes. I like how he starts with theme. I'm like, that's the first no-no of good fiction writing, and yet I totally understand why he feels the need to go there, because he doesn't want to plug in for the formula. And again, like we talk about that all the time with movies on the channel here, and especially superhero movies. This keeps coming up all the time. He's a guy who thinks that everything in Hollywood is formulaic because he doesn't actually understand people, and he doesn't actually understand the human condition, and he doesn't understand all of the things.
He thinks narrative arcs in and of themselves are something we created for fiction, and that's not what real life really is.
Yeah.
People don't go through things and change.
And that's because he doesn't do that, and the reason he doesn't do that is because he's detached and he keeps missing these opportunities for change. This movie has, I talk about opportunity for change all the time, and this movie has more of them than I have ever seen for a singular protagonist. Just over and over and over again, he has the opportunity to change things and to solve his personal problems, or at least take a risk that might lead to that, and he misses them intentionally over and over and over again. He keeps not taking those opportunities. He's got the girl that really wants to be his girlfriend that he keeps not pursuing. He's got another girl later on that he attempts to pursue, but it wasn't the right time and stuff, and that wasn't the person he really wanted to be with anyway. Most of the time, though, he's not taking those opportunities at all, and he refuses to meet the writer of the book,
which is something that I think is interesting. And I don't know if I picked up on it before this watch, because this film does a lot of things where we set things up and pay things off, where we say we're not going to do something and we do it. Like, the first thing he says about it is that he doesn't want any sex or drugs or gunfights.
Interesting, and that's all there by the end.
But the other thing that I picked up this time is when his brother is first pitching his script, The Three, he says, he talks about how the woman is... The detective falls in love with the woman even though he's never met her, and she becomes this unobtainable object.
Good call.
And that's what he does with the author.
Yeah. Good call. The title is one of the best I've ever seen as far as a double entendre title, and a really descriptive title, because I had never thought of that word in application of these two different things actually being closer together than you would think. The idea that adapting a book into a screenplay, we call that adaptation, as in we take a thing and we make it into something else and we have to change things about it. I never really dissected that and studied like why we call it that, and it's not that far removed from biological adaptation, and that was fascinating.
Well, and we keep kind of with that theme of life and how you change to fit your surroundings and things like that.
And in figuring out how to adapt the book into a screenplay that is watchable and making compromises. That's important. He's learning how to adapt to the world, himself. And he's doing so, like those things all become completely intertwined. So he's doing that while writing about himself. And the really pretentious thing he has to do in writing himself into a screenplay is ultimately the only way that he can move on and grow and change and become a whole person.
And if nobody's keeping up...
Yeah.
He is writing the screenplay in the film of the movie that we are talking
that you're
about.
Watching, yeah.
So I really need people to understand we're not like reading into it. We're not like figuring out what his motives were writing. That is what the film is about. Just want to make sure everybody's on the same page with us.
Not that I've seen as many as you have, I'm sure. This has got to be the best Nick Cage performance I've ever seen.
I think this is the best he's ever been.
I feel like you gotta be a special kind of crazy to play either of these roles. And I almost feel like the reason he's so good at it, he has such a reputation for being kind of out there, Nick Cage, that I think he's playing two parts of his own psyche. I think potentially there's the mousy Nick Cage, and then there's the really outgoing, extroverted Nick Cage.
But even Donald, being the extroverted Nick Cage, he's not as big as Nick Cage can go. He's still reserved for Nick Cage.
Yeah, but I just mean like the real Nick Cage, like in his personal life.
I
wonder if there's not those two Nick Cages, and if that's not what he's drawing on. I don't know, but I think there's maybe, because I've seen Nick Cage in interviews and stuff where he can be kind of vulnerable, and where he seems even sometimes, not that I've watched a lot of interviews with Nick Cage, but where he sometimes seems even a little bit nervous. And then there's the Nick Cage that buys a castle. You know, so I think he might be drawing from those parts of the psyche.
And
those two
think
characters are played entirely. I mean, they're totally different.
I was going to say, I think the most impressive thing is that he is playing twin brothers, and you are never confused which brother is on screen.
No, and it really feels like you've got two twin actors playing that, and that's great. And this is a thing that we've seen done a lot. It can sometimes come off as a gimmick, and I love that in the screenplay it is a gimmick. Well, kinda, sorta, because in the reality of the film there has to be that brother. But in real life, there's not. That's what gets really sticky about it. At the end of the day, is like it's meta, but it's not. Like, there is a fiction in which the screenplay that you're seeing adapted is made in. Because this is a real guy who wrote this movie, but and so then it becomes about adapting real life as much as it does about adapting a book, and drawing from personal experience and all that kind of stuff.
But not using personal experience, literally using it in a
some literally
more abstract,
but some literally certainly, because he starts with "I'm the guy that wrote Being John Malkovich."
Yeah. Well, and
which is a movie I've never seen that now I feel like I should probably watch.
Yeah, I've also never seen it. I've always planned to.
Okay.
I mean, it's not a stretch to say that Charlie Kaufman and Donald Kaufman in this film are the same person.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of, and
that they are two sides of a...
Yeah. He's probably not as neurotic as he portrays himself.
That's a good word.
Or as outgoing as...
And I don't mean to claim that Nick Cage is really wild in that there's two parts to his personality. We all have this to some degree. But I wonder if he's not... If he's not maybe an extreme case of it, and if just from what I've heard about the actor, and if that doesn't make it easier to play these roles, but also his ability to go to extremes just as an actor helps that a whole lot, and kind of surprising that this movie isn't also about acting. Yeah. Because it easily could have been, but that's too many ingredients in that stew, I think.
Yeah.
Obviously. And it's it's a screenwriter writing about screenwriting, which is funny because so often that's considered a big no-no, and people roll their eyes. That seems to be the first thing writers want to do. I almost said aspiring. I hate aspiring writers because a writer is a person that writes. But beginning writers. One of the first things people want to do is I'm living in this world of writing now, so I got to write about writing. But it's a catch-22 because we're often told by experts, write what you know. Okay, well, if what I know right now is writing, but you're telling me I shouldn't write because that's pretentious, because that's a writer writing about writing. What else am I supposed to write about? That's why you got to go out and get experience, and that kind of thing. And that is his big problem in this. Is he's having a hard time. This is such a sympathetic thing for me. Somebody trying to figure out how to write for truth. One of the things writing is about beyond entertainment is discovering truth through your writing, personal truth especially. And he doesn't know how to do that and make it sellable, make it commercial, especially without cutting corners and, as he says, making it sensationalized, especially because he doesn't want to ruin what he thinks is the
purity of the book.
Yeah,
the book he's adapting.
Which is interesting because, and you said it's a real book, and I haven't read it, but it's interesting because at the end of the day, it kind of sounds like it's not a very good book.
Well, and he reads a review that says it's not a good book.
Since I got about it.
I think it's a review in the New Yorker, which is funny because that's what she writes for. But he reads a review about how it's just passages stitched together, and there's nothing that pulls it all together as a piece.
And then, of course, I'm skeptical that might just be a reviewer that doesn't understand the book, because this is also very much about how art being good is really relative, and how important is it at the end of the day that you follow the rules if you get at a kind of truth and that sort of thing. So I mean, get back to something we were talking about earlier. Writing effective fiction often does feel like it's about plugging in for a formula, but the difficulty is the reason critics are often talking about some of the same devices and story threads and what is emotionally resonant with people is because of what has worked so many times in the past, and what continues to resonate with people no matter how many times we see it repackaged and made fresh.
And there's that interesting conversation at the beginning between the two brothers where Donald is talking about the screenwriting teacher's rules for writing, and Charlie Kaufman says there are no rules. He goes, well, he says they're not rules. Rules must be followed. They're principles.
Principles, yeah.
They're the foundations of what we've been doing all along. I forget exactly what he says, but he's like you don't have to do it, but it's worked for thousands of years.
And it's like I've always said, you can break the rules, but it has to be clear in the writing that you know you broke them and that you did it for a reason.
And that's kind of what this movie's all about.
Boy, and that's one of the things that helps make it feel less pretentious, right? Is that this easily could have been a movie that says, throw out the rule book, write whatever you want to. All art is pure art, as long as you're not doing what the what commercialism tells you to do. And that's too oversimplified. And I was really surprised. This is probably the biggest surprise for me in the movie. Because I guess I'm a boring person, and the writing stuff resonated with me more than anything did. But I was really surprised that Brian Cox's character is ultimately somewhat vindicated and not altogether vilified. Because we're with Charlie. He's our main character, and I really expected that once we finally got to him, it would be this kind of. And I guess I was somewhat weird for thinking this because Charlie's character is so antisocial and he's making a lot of mistakes and he's losing a lot throughout the movie. So this is another thing that he's ultimately somewhat wrong about, although the truth lies maybe a little bit somewhere in the middle, where he's like again his desire to write something pure and that speaks from the heart and to the heart is understandable and noble, but at the end of the day, it's a story, not an essay. So what is it that makes it a story? So yeah, it's got to have conflict. Sorry, it's got to have that. And so
I assumed if you didn't like anything else in this movie, you would like Brian Cox's speech.
Oh yeah, I love his speech. He loves his F-bombs, but it's a great speech, and there ends up being more to his philosophy, and weirdly his philosophy is somewhat my philosophy, where he's got all of these what seem like super complex rules and stuff, but he seems to be on the side that I've always been on of you can make anything work, you just got to make it work, and he doesn't come out and say that, but that's basically what he's talking about when he's talking about that ending. It's not altogether what he's saying, but it seems to be in that vein. But yeah, I really expected it to be kind of a dress down of like literary theory, and it's not, and it's talking about how a lot of literary, like some of it is bunk, sure. I think that's a little bit in the movie, but especially because that guy's Donald's screenplay has got to be crap. It has to be.
Well, but the thing is, everyone loves it.
Yeah.
No matter
because
who sees
it's
it.
sellable.
Well, but it's everyone. Everyone that reads this screenplay loves it. Which means that at least on some level it has to be enjoyable and brings you in.
Yeah, but
it might be full of plot holes, but it might...
But remember that the guy who calls it smart is the guy who's talking about banging every girl that walks by.
That's true. Well, and everyone that talks about is kind of irreputable. It's his girlfriend, it's their mom who calls it intellectually taught.
Yeah, but Charlie is somewhat unreliable, too.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say, is everyone seems to like it, but we're seeing this all through Charlie's filter.
Yeah.
He could be making these people seem less intelligent because...
And as a character study, it's brilliant because it makes you start to think like him.
And this film definitely has an unreliable narrator. Which there is narration, and then they talk about narration, and then it stops until the end of the film, where he's like, "Oh crap, I'm doing narration."
Well, I'm usually with Cox about that, where he's like, "That's a crutch."
Well, and that was something that I wasn't sure about with this film, because I know you don't like narration. I didn't know if you would go with that in this film.
And, again, I have you can break that rule if you understand you're breaking it and you have a really good reason for doing it. If we get too hard and fast about this stuff, we lose why those rules are there in the first place. We lose what the point of them is. We can't just start saying narration is bad. You have to be open-minded enough for to allow for it when it works, if it ever works. Same thing with flashbacks. Same thing with exposition and dialogue. Sometimes it's warranted, not just necessary, not just, well, there's no other way to do it, so we have to force that. No, I've seen that where it's many times, of course, where sometimes exposition does happen in dialogue in real life, and sometimes you'll get that and you'll understand why that's there. So I love that it's there at the end, because when we get it again, it's throwing your hands up in the air. There's no other way to get this information in a screenplay, and it's talking about the limitations of film and the frustrations of trying to adapt a thing where in prose you can just say, and then I thought of this thing. Yeah,
because the ending is kind of, he kisses this girl, and then he drives off, and then it kind of stops, and he's narrating what he's thinking in that moment, or what he's supposed to be thinking in that moment, and says, I know he said not to narrate, how else do I convey that I'm, optimistically looking towards life and moving on to the next, kind of a thing.
Well, and then the screenplay becomes a framework, and and part of the reason it gets away with it, besides the fact that it's commenting on that, and I don't think that it's one of those things where it's a cop out, where because it's talking about it, it's okay. It's a commentary on those devices, but also now it's a framework. Like you can have, there's voiceover, and then there's a character telling another character a story that they come in and out of, and you're seeing it from their perspective, and it's being visually dramatized, but that person's actually talking to another person. That can sometimes feel, again, like a cop-out, and sometimes it feels like it's just a totally warranted, device or a conceit. And in this case, the screenplay itself becomes that conceit, and that ends up working fine.
I kind of want to see what the screenplay for this movie looks like.
Oh, it's gotta be fascinating. I don't know how you put together a thing like this.
I do not know.
It's just wild. I mean, like, it almost feels like you're watching a movie write itself. I've never experienced this. And this movie came out 13 years ago. Yep. And may I say, it's still really fresh.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I've never seen anything like it.
The only thing
It holds up real well.
The only thing that might date it a little bit...
Yeah.
Is it's kind of done on the internet, because that guy starts that website
and that's fine because
fresh.
But also again, being John Malkovich, okay, so it's a movie that's set when it's set.
Exactly after I wasn't saying it was a problem. I was just saying, like, if people are going back, the only thing that dates it is kind of the internet is just kind of catching on.
Absolutely, but again, I just want to mention that I wasn't talking about dating so much as just this is a movie that still resonates.
Yeah, well, and it probably still resonates because it came out and, like, nobody really talks about this movie anymore, and we didn't get a bunch of people copying it.
You're right, yeah. And the same thing again, and I can't help but compare these very different movies. But the same thing happened with Stranger Than Fiction. Like that's not a movie that was copied a lot. And
which is another film I really like as well.
Mm-hmm. This might be better.
Oh, I think this is better.
Might be a little better. Stranger Than Fiction is one of my favorite films.
I like Stranger Than Fiction. I think this is better. But yeah,
just the more I'm thinking about it, I think it's kind of genius.
That's good, because I also think it's genius.
Oh yeah, I'm glad I watched it. I gotta sit down and watch it again. So much stuff to noodle. I mentioned earlier, and we didn't get real into it, so I should probably bring it up again before we close out. The personal revelations, and we talked about this again a little bit in that while he's adapting a screenplay, he's learning to adapt to life. But the speech that his brother has in the scene before he dies, I think, is really important.
Oh yeah.
And of course, he brings it back, and it's it's punctuated again to remind us about it, almost as if this is the thing that you're supposed to. This is the kind of the main crux that you're supposed to take from this movie. We've been talking about so many things. I'm sitting here trying to remember exactly how he worded it.
Oh, are you talking about his whole thing with love and how that's his person? That is his, and whatever anybody else feels about that is theirs to feel.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And this was the personal thing that resonated with me the most. And this is a cliche, and of course it opens with him rattling off a lot of cliches.
And saying that he is a cliche.
Yeah. But he. But the idea that you can't live by what society tells you are, and you can't live by through other people's eyes, and I thought this was surprisingly poignant and not sappy. The idea that sometimes just to love another person is enough, even if they don't.
And that's a personal experience just for you.
And that you own that.
Yeah.
And that feeling what you feel is important, and you have to allow yourself to do that. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, it stings when the other person doesn't care about you back, and it stings when you can't be with that person. But it doesn't make that feeling less valid. Mm-hmm. And it is a special thing that just you own. And I think the flower is somewhat of a metaphor for that. Where it's a thing that it wouldn't seem special, even though it's so rare to anybody but somebody that really cared about that. And then once you get to it, it's just what it is, and
it's just a flower.
It's kind of a letdown, but you still felt the way you felt about it.
Well, and there's because I think there's a clear dividing line between when it becomes entirely fictitious, and there's a point where she says, the things I didn't write in my book or didn't tell my husband, I think from that point on is when it's entirely fictitious, and she finds it after that point.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think it's also important that, and so then she becomes a different character. She's thrown entirely under the bus. That's not that person. Mm-hmm. And it's also important that, and I think really the place that happens is, the book runs out. Mm-hmm. And anything you write down.
There's no ending, Which is a thing that
because
they keep going back to.
Because it's not a real story.
No, because it's not fiction.
Yeah, and he's trying to adapt, and also I really liked the commentary, and maybe there's even a little bit of satire, but it's mostly just commentary about Hollywood trying to turn things into movies that weren't stories in the first place, and that unless you're making a documentary, every movie's going to be a story.
And when they first commission it, or when they first buy the rights to it, it's not even a book yet. It's just an article in the New Yorker.
Yeah,
she hasn't even written the book.
It's like, how do you make this a screenplay? And there are things. I think what's kind of interesting about it too is that there would be more of a movie there if you made it about that guy. If you made it about the guy that went after flowers, because he's got that tragic backstory, and he made a mistake driving that led to the death of some of his family, and he lost his front teeth, and it turned him into kind of a.
But that's also after that point, I believe. I think that might also be him adding fictitious backstory. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure about that. Because he hasn't gotten very far into his screenplay at all when we get that. That's real early. He's barely written anything.
The death of the family? I thought that was later.
No, that happens quite a bit earlier.
Okay, maybe I'm just
maybe midway through the film.
Okay, maybe you're right.
I mean, that happens pretty early. We haven't even seen the end of the book yet.
Oh, okay.
My assumption was that that had to be part, and also like the thing with, and this is what I'm a little bit confused about. I'm not sure that we're seeing. Okay, so are we seeing a first draft of the screenplay, or has he gone back and edited it since then? Because we seed all the stuff about the drugs and stuff, and you could see that maybe, and again, this is just on a first viewing, so I might be totally off base, and I probably said some things that are totally off base, but when we have, but early on when we're seeding, like with the Indians, helping with the flowers and stuff. That could be him extrapolating a thing that wouldn't have really been there once he gets to the drug part of the flowers, or he might have made that up for his screenplay over the book and then seeded that in a rewrite. Like, I don't know.
No, I definitely don't think we're seeing the first draft. I don't think that's the idea. I think it's definitely. Are we talking about in the film or the actual movie?
No, in the film.
Okay, in the film, I think we're seeing him write the first draft.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what he's doing.
Right, but that's the thing you got to ask yourself is, are we watching, because we're watching him figure out the draft as he goes, and we're seeing him like scribble out things and rewrite stuff, and we have all the false starts in the film that we're watching, but the screenplay he's creating is the film we're watching, so it kind of has to be a first draft.
Yeah.
Kinda, right?
Yeah. I don't know. Well, the Indian thing has to be there. That can't be set up just for the drug stuff later, because they're the only ones that are allowed to take that off the land.
Right.
And that seems like a really real thing. Like, that seems like you couldn't.
Sure.
I don't know. I don't think we get enough of his script to really, because he has to be working on the first draft. I mean, by the end of the film, he has completed the screenplay, I believe, because he's talking about moving on to a new project.
Yeah.
So by the end of the film, he has finalized that screenplay. So I don't know.
The thing that's most fascinating about this movie to me is that I have issues with the third act of the movie he wrote, but the movie he wrote isn't exactly what we're seeing. I mean, it is, but it's about more stuff than just the book about flowers. So it's
about being about the book about flowers.
Yeah, and about how that's impossible to make a sellable screenplay, and even to maybe make a good story that would resonate with people. So, like it's like before that, it's just experimental art, and and importantly, he doesn't even know what's so special about flowers. Like, he doesn't even. That's not even there with him.
He has this thing where he keeps talking about how he wants everyone to see how beautiful flowers are, and there's a point where somebody goes, well, are flowers beautiful?
He's like,
I don't know.
I guess I don't know. Because he's not about anything, and he can't. And the line in the book that seems to resonate with him the most, and these are really interesting parallel characters, she has a lot of the same problems he does, is that, I mean, the woman that wrote the article in the book, is the line about...
Her one passion is wanting to be passionate about things?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And she can't find that. But it's a movie that intentionally veers off into a weird place in the third act where it becomes sensationalized, and
because it's making a point about that.
And it works because it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And that's just absolutely fascinating to me. I want to hate it for making me not like those characters by the end, because they were the guy that she wrote the flower book about, and her herself. I expected him to be a total creep, and then he was fascinating, and then he's just a total creep. And same thing with her. And by the end, they get dwindled down to their one-dimensional brass tack archetypes, so they can be the bad guys. And they haven't been the whole movie. And they also had a subplot where she was the protagonist, and she's and she's following this guy that she's falling in love with, and it's a complex relationship, and you don't you don't think that she would have it in her to do the terrible thing she does by the end. Or that could have been a tragedy that worked too.
And she doesn't, because it didn't happen, because it's the ending of the movie isn't real.
Yeah.
In the same way the rest of the movie is somewhat real. Yeah.
But then in the fiction of the movie, because his brother dies, doesn't he actually go through all the sensational stuff, really, and then just write it down? Isn't that what actually happens?
Yeah.
So then he ends up... Yeah. So then I don't know about that. Like...
I mean, kind of. Except that in the real world, Charlie Kaufman really wrote this movie about Charlie Kaufman.
Yeah, right. And that's the part that you have to keep in your head, is that all this insane stuff that's happening in the movie is him figuring out his screenplay.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, it's a thought-provoking movie.
Well, and one thing that I want to say is
yeah.
I feel like as we're talking about it sounds really confusing.
Yeah. It's not confusing.
Not while you're watching it.
I mean, the meta-contextual stuff and like exactly what's real and what isn't, or I don't even want to really say that. It's not a what's real film.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I'm not sure even again in the fiction. Well, no, he had to have gone through that stuff at the end. So even that, like, I'm not confused about. I just. Yeah. Anyway.
But it's.
But remember, I'm not lost once I understand that the stuff that's happening in the past. Really, for the fiction, some of it happened.
I think what I'm trying to say is, while you're watching it doesn't feel as complex as it sounds when you're talking about it. It's an entirely watchable film. It is not a...
You wouldn't think that could be straightforward.
Yeah, and it's as straightforward as it could possibly be, and it's a funny movie.
Yeah. Well, and it's incredibly engaging even before, and that's one of the things that's really impressive about it, that even when you don't know what exactly is going on, you think you do, at least to some degree, and you're like I found the characters in the subplot really interesting and compelling, and I was kind of surprised by that because it's difficult with a movie like this not to make an audience check their watch until they get back to the part that they're interested in. I didn't have that with this.
Yeah.
And I really expected to once we went to the flashbacks.
Yeah, I think it's a really... I think this film should be taught. I think this should be a prerequisite in, like, writing classes.
Well, especially a screenwriting class.
Oh, yeah.
Seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah. And maybe it is. Maybe, I don't know what I'm talking about.
Especially if you get into a unit about adapting things.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, yeah, it would have to show up there, right? It would have to show
up there, and I feel remiss running this channel for 7 years and not having watched this movie because this is a subject that comes up with us all the time because our bread and butter is comic book movies.
And they're all, by definition, adaptations.
Adaptations, yeah. And, yeah, you're going to see me going back to this movie a lot when we have discussions about that, because...
You'll just keep using the Brian Cox clip?
Yes, absolutely. That's just, that'll just start showing up in rewinds with the F-bombs bleeped out every time. Anything else we should bring up?
Is there... Well, I guess we should mention, we went this entire video without mentioning it. The woman that writes the book is played by Meryl Streep.
Oh, yeah.
That's a thing. She's important. She's a big name.
It's a big cast.
You know what's interesting? I just thought of this. The girlfriend. Donald's girlfriend?
Is Gyllenhaal.
Who's in Stranger Than Fiction.
Oh, I forgot she was in that movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that I forgot about. I thought you were going to be like, you know who that is. But yeah, no, I forgot she was in that.
Yeah.
She's really young here.
Oh, yeah, she is. Yeah.
And what's weird is that and the Stranger Than Fiction come out real close together.
I think Stranger Than Fiction's a little bit later. I thought it was like 05 or 06.
I think it's like 04 or 05. Like, it's only 2 or 3 years later.
Okay.
I can check real quick. Let's see if I can find it. Hold on. It's right there.
There it is.
Oh, except that, again, these
might be
have the wrong dates on them. It'll just be whatever. Here's Stranger Than Fiction. Yep, there she is. Boy, I forgot that was her. This has it at 06, so it might have come out in 05.
Okay, so yeah, you're right. They're not too far apart.
Yeah. Interesting. Anyway, well, everybody, thanks as always for watching. We sure appreciate it. And I I'm going to make Eric watch something next time, so...
Are we going into our Halloween films next?
We are. We're going to go into our Halloween films.
We're going to do some Halloween made me watch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to make Eric watch some horror films that he's never seen. Isn't that weird? That there would be, because I'm not a horror guy, there would be horror films that I've seen.
And a lot of them are really obvious films that you're like, how have you never seen this?
That's right. Mm-hmm. I'm going to do all the obvious stuff, and Eric's going to show me things that are not so obvious. We'll probably, do 2 a piece or more if we have time. I don't know. But throughout October, we're going to do some scary movies. Scary. Everybody, thanks as always for his ghost. Thanks for watching. I'm Captain Logan.
I'm Eric.
See you next time.